Hello guys, hope you're doing well. My name is Andrew, otherwise known as Shadow6, and today I'll be standing in for Jack as we talk about a new and upcoming modern military game I thought you lot would be interested in. For those of you who wanted Battlefield 5 to be a game with a modern setting, perhaps this is the game that could become a healthy alternative for you if it delivers on all of its promises. So what's it called then? Well, quite simply, World War III. A multiplayer FPS game by indie developer Farm 51. If you're familiar with the Battlefield franchise, then you will probably notice a lot of similarities, which is natural as both games approach the genre in a very similar way. They're both large-scale games with a mix of infantry and vehicle combat that have a focus on team play. It's an extremely ambitious game though. Farm 51 started with around 10 to 15 developers working on the title, but that has now grown to around 50. Even still, that's a relatively small team for such a big project, so I'm really interested to see the first gameplay trailer that's coming soon. Recently, the developers did an AMA on Discord and they answered a ton of questions that helped us get a better feel for the sort of game World War III will be. We know already that the game is a modern FPS title set during a global conflict. In terms of vehicles, well, there are going to be a lot of them, but that won't include air vehicles, at least for the time being. You will be getting plenty of transport vehicles, modern tanks, even drones that you can pilot, but no actual air vehicles or boats, at least when the game launches. They have mentioned plans to add the Dragonfly or the MQ-8C Fire Scout drone helicopter into the game, but again, this would be remotely controlled and not a fully fledged helicopter you could pilot. It's also been confirmed that there will be vehicles that require multiple people to operate, but you will be able to lock your vehicle or kick out unwanted soldiers. That's fine in practice, so long as it can't be abused. Interestingly, when it comes to vehicle damage, you won't actually be able to repair a tank fully, but you will be able to repair its subsystems, like its optics for example. A different approach to Battlefield in that respect. The initial plan for the game is to release into early access later this year, and they've been quite open about saying that they expect it to stay in early access for 12 to 15 months. I think that timescale could work out. It just depends on how much progress has already been made on the game. When it comes to map size, it's going to be large-scale warfare just like you would expect to see in Battlefield at around 1 square kilometre. They describe city maps as being a few city blocks, and they certainly seem to have a few urban city maps planned. Player numbers are again similar to Battlefield, with the upper player count sitting at 64 players and 32 and 48 player maps also being offered up. Again, this could change as the game heads into early access, if perhaps there are some balancing issues with the player numbers. When it comes to the actual gameplay, well, don't expect a class system in World War III, because it won't have one. This game is approaching things very differently to the likes of Battlefield. You won't have specific classes to choose from. Instead, you can customize your soldier's character as you see fit with certain weapons and gadgets. The downside to this, or the way they are choosing to balance it, is with a weight system. Certain weapons, gadgets, armour and the like will all have their own weight, and your sprinting and movement speed will depend on that total weight. There are a few problems that come with this, but some benefits as well. The main problem I see is balance. Trying to balance certain items when all players have access to them could be a bit of a nightmare. If you had a class system that restricted certain weapons, so say an assault class that only had SMGs, but the gadget was a bit too strong, well, you could perhaps move that across to a different class, or perhaps buff a class in a different way. When you can pick whatever gadgets and weapons you want, it can lead to situations similar to the Battlefield 3 medic, for instance. Super powerful rifles, and the ability to heal, which is itself extremely powerful. It will definitely be interesting to see how well they get the balance, because it will be really important for gameplay. However, with a weighted system, you could argue that the better guns will just cost a lot more weight if you want to use them. Speaking of weapons, the game will have a comprehensive attachment system, so weapons will have full customization. Items like stocks, barrels, grips, sights, lasers can all be attached to your weapon. When it comes to your vehicle, you can modify its armoured turrets, remote control weapons, and things like active protection systems. Player customization is also in as well, so you can change up your uniform, your helmets, headgear, camos, flags, body paint, face paint, emblems, the list goes on. Customization is the order of the day. Now, the devs say that this game has gone for a realistic weapon approach, but it's not as realistic as something like armour, for example. Weapons have a ballistic curve and they operate close to the real thing in terms of weapon characteristics, but the developers have said that they have scaled down the effective ranges of the weapons to about half in order to keep certain types of weapons viable. Makes sense really, because realism doesn't necessarily equal fun. There are going to be around 20 weapons to play with when the game comes to early access, including SMGs, LMGs, sniper rifles, RPGs, shotguns, all the usual toys you would expect from a modern day shooter. When it comes to weapon mechanics, there are a few things that the game is doing that Battlefield doesn't have. Bullet ricochet is one of them. That's a nice little addition, but another is wind deviation, bullets whose trajectory can be affected by the wind. I think this sounds like a fantastic idea and it adds another element of realism, but I think if this isn't implemented correctly, it could be something that's extremely frustrating. Imagine you are playing with a sniper rifle and you're aiming at someone, seemingly right on them, but the wind is affecting your shot with no clear indication of its speed or direction. That could be pretty annoying, right? There would have to be a clear indicator in the game that helped you at least work out in which way the wind was blowing and its relative strength. I think it's something you would have to experience before you could really judge if it's a good mechanic or something that would just become a constant source of frustration. It's impossible to say without getting a feel for it yourself. When asked about the projectile behaviour, a developer answered, "We're using real-world data about the projectile behaviour, taking into account the forces that are acting upon the projectiles. We've opted to keep it playable though, so don't worry about that." So I think it's fair to say they understand that it needs to be playable and fun above all else, so hopefully that will be the case. Just like in Battlefield, the game will also have a squad system, and right now they don't seem to have quite nailed down how many players will be in each squad, somewhere between 4 and 6. Just like in Battlefield, the squad leader will be able to mark down objectives for the squad to follow, either attacking or defending. It also seems that when you do well, so gaining points from completing map objectives, you can call in a precision strike from jets targeted by you. Think something along the lines of the V1 rocket from the Battlefield 5 Alpha. Other interesting things include no automatic health regen, at least that's how it appears from what I've seen and read. Friendly fire, that's going to be interesting. You'll be able to lean, although it will be input based and not automatic. There will be no ranked or competitive mode, at least at launch. And weapons and gadgets are not faction locked, so as long as you've unlocked them you can use them regardless of what side you're playing on. The game will also be less than $60 and it's multiplayer only, no single player is planned. When it comes to unlocking items, the game works in a fairly simple way. By playing the game you gain XP. This XP turns into game currency and you can use that to buy weapons and gadgets, etc. The question was posed as to how they will ensure it's balanced, but the developers claim that even the basic weapons have advantages, especially when it comes to weapon weight, if, for example, it doesn't have any heavy attachments. They don't currently have any plans for a loot crate system, but that could of course change down the line. One thing that may disappoint potential players is a lack of destruction, and that's something that Frostbite does so well and has spoilt me in other games. The devs say that there is destruction in the game, but it's going to be quite limited. You can destroy certain small environmental structures, I imagine things like fences, wooden elements, small cover, but there isn't going to be large scale destruction, and they've said that one of the reasons for that is that destruction is hard in Unreal Engine for indie developers, and I get that. They are a relatively small studio and they have to try and focus on the core game before trying to add in complexities like destruction. Lastly, I liked the fact that they mentioned some specific PC related features that are already in the game, including an FOV slider, widescreen support and 4K support. Kind of expected these days, but good to see the support there nonetheless. Wrapping things up, I mentioned it earlier, but I definitely feel like this is an optimistic game, especially when considering the size of the studio. From the footage I've seen so far, I think it's got a long way to go, but if they pull it off, it could be a pretty interesting title. I'm looking forward to seeing the gameplay trailer so that we can get a much better feel for how the game will look and play. Right now we only have a cinematic trailer that was a bit sketchy and a few clips from Twitter. Time will tell if World War III goes out with a bang or a whimper. So that's all for today, folks. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you didn't, a dislike. And I'll see you in the next one.